What if you could see Jesus? Not the paintings, not the stained glass, not the sanitized European-looking figure that churches have been showing you for centuries. What if you could see the actual man in an actual moment doing something that was never recorded in any scripture? The story I'm about to share is not religion. It's not interpretation. It's what one man witnessed when a being from another world showed him a memory so vivid, so real, that it felt more like time travel than vision. A memory of Jesus of Nazareth doing something that will challenge everything you think you know about who he was and what he was really trying to teach. I must warn you, what you're about to hear will disturb you if you've built your faith on the version of Jesus that churches have been preaching for 2,000 years, but it might also set you free, because the real Jesus, the one who actually walked this earth, was far more revolutionary and far more dangerous to religious authority than the domesticated savior you've been sold. If you've ever felt that something was missing from the story, that the Jesus of the Gospels was somehow incomplete, that the man who threatened empires couldn't possibly be as tame as Sunday school made him seem, this account will finally show you what was hidden. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because what happened to Samuel Cross in the hills of eastern Tennessee will reveal a memory of Jesus that no church has ever shown you. Now let me tell you how it all started. Samuel Cross was sitting in the dark when he heard the crash. It was 2:47 in the morning, and he hadn't been able to sleep again. 3 months of insomnia will do that to you. 3 months of staring at the ceiling, replaying the same memories, asking the same questions that never got answered. The crash came from somewhere behind his property, back in the woods that stretched for miles into the Appalachian foothills. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't a tree falling. It was something else. Something that shook the windows of his cabin and left a ringing in his ears. Samuel sat there for a long moment, not moving. Part of him didn't care what had crashed. Part of him had stopped caring about much of anything, but old habits die hard, and Samuel Cross had spent 40 years as a volunteer firefighter in addition to his work as a carpenter. When something crashed in the middle of the night, you went to check on it. That's just what you did. He pulled on his boots, he grabbed his flashlight, and he walked out into the Tennessee darkness toward whatever had fallen from the sky. To understand why Samuel was sitting alone in a dark cabin at 2:47 in the morning, you need to understand what had happened to him, and what had happened to him started with a boy named Matthew. Matthew Cross was Samuel's only child, born when Samuel was 32 and his wife Rebecca was 29, a surprise pregnancy that turned into the greatest joy of both their lives. Matthew was one of those kids who seemed to light up every room he entered, smart, funny, kind in a way that felt natural rather than forced. He played guitar. He volunteered at the church food pantry. He wanted to be a youth pastor when he grew up, because he said he wanted to help kids who were struggling the way some of his friends had struggled. Samuel and Rebecca raised Matthew in the Baptist church, where Samuel's family had worshiped for 4 generations. They taught him to pray, to read scripture, to trust in the Lord's plan even when life got hard, and Matthew believed. He believed with the pure, uncomplicated faith of someone who had never had a reason to doubt. He was 17 when he got sick, leukemia. The doctors caught it late because Matthew had been hiding symptoms, not wanting to worry his parents during a time when money was tight and stress was high. By the time they found it, the cancer had spread. The prognosis was bad. The treatments were brutal, and through it all, Matthew kept his faith. He prayed every night. He told his parents that God had a plan, that whatever happened would be for a reason, that they shouldn't be afraid. He died 3 days after his 18th birthday. Rebecca was holding one hand, Samuel was holding the other, and in his final moments, Matthew looked at his father with eyes that were far too old for his young face and said something Samuel would never forget. "Dad, I think I was wrong. I don't feel God anywhere. I'm scared." Those were his last words. "I'm scared." Samuel watched his son die afraid, watched the boy who had trusted God his entire short life slip away into darkness without the comfort he had been promised. And something in Samuel broke that night, something that had never healed. Rebecca tried to hold on. She went back to church. She told Samuel that Matthew was with Jesus now, that they would see him again, that their faith would carry them through. But Samuel couldn't do it. He sat in those pews and heard the same platitudes he had heard his whole life. and all he could think about was Matthew's face in those final moments. The fear, the doubt, the realization that everything he had believed might have been a lie. Samuel stopped going to church. He stopped praying. He started drinking, not heavily at first, but enough to dull the pain that never went away. Rebecca held on for 2 years. She begged Samuel to come back to faith, to find healing in the community that had always supported them, but Samuel couldn't. Every time he tried to pray, he heard Matthew's voice. "I'm scared. Rebecca left 8 months ago. She said she still loved Samuel, but she couldn't watch him destroy himself. She moved to Nashville to stay with her sister. She called every Sunday, but the conversations were short and painful. 2 people who had shared everything now had nothing left to say." So Samuel sat alone in the cabin he had built with his own hands, the cabin where Matthew had learned to use a hammer, where they had spent weekends fishing and hiking and talking about life. He sat in the dark because the light felt like a lie. He didn't sleep because sleep brought dreams, and dreams brought Matthew's face, and he had stopped believing in anything. God, heaven, the soul. All of it felt like stories people told themselves to make death less terrifying. And those stories had failed his son in the moment when he needed them most. That was the man who walked into the Tennessee woods at 2:47 in the morning to find out what had crashed behind his property. Samuel walked for about 15 minutes before he found it. His flashlight beam swept across trees and underbrush and then stopped on something that didn't belong, something metallic, something curved and smooth in a way that nothing natural could be. It was a craft, damaged, smoke rising from a gash in its side, not large, maybe the size of a pickup truck, but shaped like nothing Samuel had ever seen. He stopped walking. His heart was pounding now, which surprised him. He had thought he was past caring about anything enough for his heart to pound. And then he saw the figure. It was lying on the ground about 20 feet from the craft. Humanoid, but not human, gray skin, long limbs, a head that was too large for the body. Even in the harsh white beam of the flashlight, Samuel could tell this was not anything from Earth. His first instinct was to run. His second instinct was to call someone. But who do you call when an alien crashes in your backyard? And then the figure moved, just slightly. A hand reaching up, then falling back to the ground. The universal gesture of someone hurt and helpless. Samuel had been a volunteer firefighter for 40 years. He had pulled people from car wrecks. He had performed CPR on heart attack victims. He had run toward danger when everyone else was running away. He didn't know what this thing was, but he knew it was hurt, and he wasn't the kind of man who walked away from something that was hurt. He approached slowly, flashlight in one hand, the other hand open and visible. "Can you understand me?" he called out. "Are you injured?" The figure's head turned toward him. Large dark eyes caught the flashlight beam and seemed to absorb it rather than reflect it. And then a voice, not in Samuel's ears but inside his head, clear and calm. "I understand you. Yes, I am injured. Please help me." Samuel stopped walking. Every nerve in his body was screaming that this was wrong, impossible, dangerous, but the voice in his head didn't feel threatening. It felt tired, hurt, desperate. "What do you need?" Samuel asked. "I don't know how to help something like you." "Shelter. Rest. My body will heal if I am not exposed to the elements. The craft cannot protect me anymore." Samuel looked at the damaged vessel. The gash in its side was deep. Whatever had happened during the crash, this thing wasn't going to be flying anywhere soon. "I have a cabin," Samuel said, "quarter-mile back. Can you walk?" "With assistance." Samuel moved forward and helped the being to its feet. It was lighter than he expected, almost fragile, like helping an elderly person rather than a grown adult. They moved slowly through the woods, the creature leaning heavily on Samuel's shoulder, neither of them speaking. When they reached the cabin, Samuel helped the being onto the couch. He brought blankets. He turned up the heat. He did the things you do when someone is hurt and cold, even when that someone is an alien from God knows where. Then he sat in the chair across from the couch and looked at the impossible thing he had just carried into his home. "So," he said, "what happens now? Now I rest, and when I am stronger, I will answer the questions you are too afraid to ask." Samuel frowned. "What questions?" "The ones that have been eating you alive since your son died. The questions about God, about souls, about what happens when we die, about whether any of it means anything at all. Samuel felt like he had been punched. How do you know about my son? I know many things, Samuel Cross. I know you lost your faith when Matthew died. I know you blame God for taking him. I know you have spent 3 months wondering if everything you believed was a lie. The voice in his head was gentle, not accusing. I also know that Matthew's last words haunt you, that you cannot forgive a God who would let a faithful boy die afraid. Samuel's hands were shaking. He hadn't told anyone about Matthew's last words, not Rebecca, not the pastor, no one. How do you know that? He whispered. How can you possibly know that? Because I have been watching you, because your pain created a signal that beings like me can perceive, and because I did not crash here by accident, Samuel. I crashed here because you are ready to see something that will change everything you believe. Samuel stared at the creature on his couch. Part of him wanted to throw it out, to pretend this wasn't happening, to go back to his dark cabin and his sleepless nights and his comfortable hopelessness. But another part of him, a part he had thought was dead, felt something stir, curiosity, hope, the dangerous possibility that there might be answers after all. What do you want to show me? He asked. A memory, not mine, a memory we have preserved for 2,000 years, a memory of the one you call Jesus. Samuel laughed. It came out bitter and harsh. Jesus, the same Jesus who was supposed to save my son, the same Jesus who let a 17-year-old boy die afraid in a hospital bed, that Jesus, the same one. But not the Jesus you have been taught about, the real one, the one the church has never shown you. Samuel was silent for a long moment. Even if I wanted to see this memory, he said finally, what difference would it make? My son is still dead. My faith is still gone. Nothing you can show me will change that. Perhaps not. But it might change what those things mean. It might show you that Matthew's death was not what you think it was, and it might give you peace for the first time since you watched him close his eyes. Samuel felt tears threatening. He hadn't cried since the funeral. He had locked all of that away, buried it under anger and alcohol and the dull numbness of despair. Why would you do this for me? He asked. Why would an alien care about one broken man in the Tennessee hills? Because helping souls remember is what my kind does. It is why we observe your world, why we preserve memories that humans have lost or distorted, and because your son asked us to. Samuel's heart stopped. What did you just say? Your son Matthew. He is not gone, Samuel. He exists in a form you cannot currently perceive, and he has been trying to reach you since the moment he died. He asked us to help you. This crash, this meeting, it is not accident. It is answer to a prayer you didn't know was being offered. Samuel couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The idea that Matthew was still somewhere, that he had been trying to reach out, that he had somehow arranged this impossible meeting, it was too much to hope for, too much to risk believing. Rest now, the being said. You are exhausted. Tomorrow, when we are both stronger, I will show you the memory, and then you can decide what to believe. Samuel didn't argue. He didn't have the energy. He sat in his chair, watching the impossible creature sleep on his couch, and eventually, for the first time in 3 months, he drifted off himself. He didn't dream. But he slept deeply, and when he woke up, the being was watching him with those large, dark eyes. Good morning, Samuel Cross. Are you ready to see Jesus? Samuel made coffee. It felt absurd, making coffee while an alien sat on his couch, waiting to show him a 2,000-year-old memory of Jesus Christ. But he needed the normalcy, needed something familiar to hold on to. He brought a cup to the living room and sat in his chair. How does this work? He asked. This memory you're going to show me, I will share it directly with your consciousness. You will experience it as if you were there. You will see, hear, and feel everything as a witness. It will be more real than any dream, more vivid than any movie. For a few moments, you will stand in the presence of Jesus of Nazareth. Samuel took a sip of coffee. His hands were still shaking slightly. Why this particular memory? What makes it so important? Because it shows something the Gospels never recorded. Something Jesus did that would have changed everything if it had been included in Scripture. The early church suppressed it because it threatened their authority. We preserved it because it contains truth that humanity needs. And what truth is that? You will see for yourself. Words cannot convey it properly. It must be experienced. Samuel set down his coffee cup. "Okay," he said. "I'm ready." The being reached out one long gray hand and touched Samuel's forehead. The touch was cool, almost electric, and then the world dissolved. Samuel found himself standing on a hillside in the middle of the day. The sun was warm on his face, the air smelled of dust and flowers, and something cooking in the distance. The landscape was foreign, rocky hills covered with scrubby vegetation, nothing like the green mountains of Tennessee. And there were people, a crowd of maybe 50 or 60, gathered around a central figure who was speaking. Samuel couldn't understand the words at first, but then something shifted, and the language became clear in his mind, translated directly into concepts he could grasp. The central figure was a man, not tall, not particularly impressive to look at. Dark skin, weathered by sun and wind, black hair, roughly cut, a beard that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in weeks, clothes that were simple, worn, dusty from travel. This was Jesus, not the pale, serene figure of European paintings, not the glowing, perfect savior of church imagery. A real man, a Jewish man, someone who looked like he worked with his hands and slept outdoors and had never once worried about appearing dignified. Samuel moved closer, drawn by a force he couldn't explain. He passed through the crowd like a ghost, unseen, until he was standing just a few feet from Jesus. The man's eyes caught his attention first, dark brown, almost black, but with something in them that Samuel couldn't name, an intensity, a depth, the eyes of someone who saw more than what was visible. Jesus was speaking to a woman who knelt before him. She was crying. Her clothes were ragged, her hair tangled. She looked like someone who had lost everything. "Rabbi," she said between sobs, "my daughter is dying. The physicians can do nothing. They say she has only hours left. Please, I've heard you can heal. Please save her." The crowd murmured. Samuel sensed tension, expectation, the held breath of people waiting to see a miracle. But Jesus did something unexpected. He knelt down, right there in the dirt, so that he was at eye level with the weeping woman. "What is your daughter's name?" he asked. His voice was gentle, unhurried. "Miriam. She is only 12 years old. She doesn't deserve to die." Jesus reached out and took the woman's hands in his. "Listen to me," he said. "What I'm about to tell you is more important than any healing I could perform. Do you understand?" The woman nodded, though her eyes were wild with desperation. "Your daughter's body may die," Jesus said. "I will not lie to you about that. The body is temporary. It fails. This is its nature." The woman began to sob harder. "No, please, you can save her. I know you can." Jesus didn't look away. He held her hands and met her eyes with that impossible intensity. "What I can tell you is this. Miriam's soul cannot die. The part of her that laughs and loves and dreams, that part is eternal. It was not born when her body was born. It will not end when her body ends. Death is a doorway, not an ending. Your daughter will pass through that doorway, but she will not cease to exist." The woman shook her head. "That is not enough. I want her here. I want to hold her, to watch her grow, to see her marry and have children of her own." "I know," Jesus said, "and your grief is sacred. Do not let anyone tell you not to feel it. But let me share something with you that might ease your suffering." He closed his eyes for a moment, and then he did something that made Samuel's breath catch. Jesus placed one hand over the woman's heart and one hand on his own chest. "Feel this," he said. "I'm opening a door. Just for a moment." The woman gasped. Her eyes went wide. Tears streamed down her face, but they were different tears now, not tears of anguish. Something else. "I feel her," the woman whispered. "I feel Miriam. She's not afraid. She's not in pain. She is already partly in the place she is going," Jesus said. "She is surrounded by love that you cannot see from here. When her body releases, she will simply complete a journey she has already begun. But I won't be able to hold her," the woman said. "I won't be able to talk to her. You will talk to her every day, in your heart, in your prayers. The connection between mother and child does not end with death. It cannot end. Love is stronger than the grave. This is not metaphor. This is the truth I came to teach." Jesus released the woman's hands and stood. The crowd was silent, unsure what they had just witnessed. "Go to your daughter," Jesus said. Be with her in these final hours. Hold her hand and tell her not to be afraid. Tell her that death is a homecoming. Tell her that you will miss her, but you will see her again. And when she passes, feel for her in your heart. She will be there. She will always be there. The woman stood, trembling. She looked at Jesus with eyes that held both grief and something that might have been wonder. "How do you know these things?" she asked. "How can you be so certain?" "Because I have seen both sides of the door," Jesus said. "Because I come from the same place your daughter is going. And because the love that connects us all is the only thing in the universe that never fails, never fades, never dies." The woman nodded. She turned and walked away, moving quickly, desperate to reach her daughter's bedside. The crowd began to murmur again. Some looked disappointed that no miracle had been performed. Others looked confused, uncertain what to make of what they had witnessed. A man pushed forward, one of the religious leaders based on his clothes and bearing. "Teacher," he said, and there was accusation in his voice, "the people came for healing. Why did you not heal the child?" Jesus turned to face him, and for a moment Samuel saw something flash in those dark eyes. Not anger exactly, something fiercer, something that made the religious leader take a step back. "You want miracles," Jesus said, and his voice was louder now, addressing the whole crowd. "You want me to suspend the laws of nature, to override the process of physical death, to prove my authority by bending reality to your will." He swept his gaze across the gathered people. "But that is not why I came. I did not come to end physical death. I came to end your fear of it. I came to teach you that you are not your bodies. That consciousness, the real you, does not depend on flesh and blood. That death is not a tragedy to be avoided, but a transition to be understood." The religious leader sputtered. "But the scriptures say..." "The scriptures say what men wrote down," Jesus interrupted. "And men filter truth through their own understanding. They write what comforts them. They preserve what serves their purposes. And sometimes, often, they miss the most important things." "This is heresy," the leader said. "You claim authority above the scriptures?" "I claim the authority of direct experience," Jesus said. "I have stood in the presence of what you call God. I have seen the structure of reality from outside physical form. I know what I know because I have experienced it, not because I read it in a book." He turned back to the crowd. "This is what I came to teach you, not doctrine, not rules, not a system of beliefs that require you to take someone else's word for what is true. I came to teach you how to experience directly what I have experienced, how to know, not believe, that you are eternal, that love survives death, that the kingdom of heaven is not somewhere you go when you die, but a state of consciousness available to you right now." Samuel listened, transfixed. This was not the Jesus of Sunday school. This was not the gentle shepherd who spoke in parables about sheep and coins. This was something else, someone else, a revolutionary, a mystic, someone who threatened everything the religious establishment had built. No wonder they killed him. The memory shifted. Time jumped forward. Samuel found himself in a different place now, a room, small, lit by oil lamps, evening. Jesus sat with a small group, maybe a dozen people. They looked exhausted, afraid. These must be his close disciples, the inner circle. "Teacher," one of them said, a man Samuel recognized somehow as Peter, "what you said today was dangerous. The Pharisees are already talking. They say you claim authority above the law, above Moses, above God himself." Jesus smiled, but it was a tired smile. "Peter," he said, "how many times must I tell you? I do not claim authority above God. I claim identity with God, as do you, as does every person who has ever lived." The disciples exchanged nervous glances. "That's what will get you killed," another one said. This was Thomas, the doubter, the questioner. "You cannot say things like that and expect to survive." "I do not expect to survive," Jesus said quietly. "Not in this body. But that is precisely my point. This body is not who I am, and your bodies are not who you are. When you understand this, truly understand it, death loses its power, fear loses its grip, and you become free in a way that no authority can threaten." "How?" Thomas pressed. "How do we understand it? We hear your words, but we don't experience what you experience. We see you perform miracles, but we cannot do what you do." Jesus leaned forward, and his voice became intense. "The miracles are not the point. They never were. I perform them because they get people's attention, because they create openings for teaching. But healing a body is nothing compared to awakening a soul. And awakening is not something I do to you. It is something you must do for yourself. Then teach us, Peter said. Show us how. I have been showing you, every day, every teaching, every moment we have spent together, but you keep looking outside when you should be looking within. Jesus stood and moved to the center of the small room. Let me try once more. Close your eyes, all of you. The disciples obeyed, though some looked uncertain. Now, Jesus said, find the part of you that is watching your thoughts, not the thoughts themselves, the awareness behind the thoughts, the one who observes. Silence fell over the room. Samuel watched the disciples, their faces flickering in lamplight, searching inside themselves for something they couldn't quite find. That awareness, Jesus said softly, is not your body. It is not your personality. It is not your name or your history or your beliefs. It is the part of you that has always been present, from your earliest memories to this moment. It is the same now as it was when you were children. It does not age. It does not change. It simply observes. I feel something, one of the disciples whispered. A woman. Maybe Mary Magdalene, though Samuel wasn't sure. That something, Jesus said, is what you really are. It is consciousness itself, temporarily focused through the lens of a body and a personality. When the body dies, that awareness does not end. It simply stops being focused in that particular way. It returns to a fuller state, a state of freedom and connection that physical form necessarily limits. But how can we know this? Thomas asked, his eyes still closed. How can we be certain? Faith is not enough for me. I need to know. Jesus walked over to Thomas and placed a hand on his shoulder. Then know. Stop asking me to convince you and start looking directly. The experience is available to you right now. It does not require my permission. It does not require belief. It only requires that you turn your attention inward and see what has always been there. The memory began to fade. The lamp-lit room dissolved. Samuel felt himself being pulled back, away from the ancient scene, back toward his own body, his own time, his own life. But before the transition completed, he saw one more thing. Jesus looked up, directly at Samuel, as if he could see through 2,000 years of time, and he smiled. Tell them, Jesus said, and his voice was clear despite the impossibility. Tell them I was never trying to start a religion. I was trying to end their fear. Death is not what they think it is, and neither am I. Samuel opened his eyes. He was back in his cabin. The morning light streamed through the windows. The being was watching him from the couch. Samuel couldn't speak. Tears streamed down his face. His whole body was trembling. He had seen Jesus, the real Jesus, not a painting, not a statue, not a sanitized, church-approved version of a revolutionary teacher. The actual man, speaking actual words that no scripture contained, teaching things that threatened everything Samuel had been taught in 40 years of Baptist church attendance. You saw, the being said. It was not a question. Samuel nodded. He didn't trust his voice yet. The memory we showed you is one of thousands we have preserved. The early church suppressed anything that threatened their authority, anything that suggested people could connect with God directly without priestly mediation, anything that made death seem like a doorway rather than a punishment for sin. Samuel found his voice, rough, broken. He looked at me. At the end, Jesus looked directly at me. Yes, he was aware of observation. He frequently spoke to those who would witness memories of him in the future. He knew his teachings would be distorted. He tried to plant seeds that would survive the distortion. The being shifted on the couch, and Samuel sensed it was about to say something important. Samuel, the woman whose daughter was dying, do you understand what Jesus showed her? Samuel thought about it, the hand on the heart, the sudden shift in the woman's face, the moment of connection. He let her feel her daughter. Even though Miriam was still alive, he showed the mother something about where she was going, something that brought comfort. Yes, Jesus opened a channel between dimensions. He showed the mother that consciousness does not end with the body, that connection does not end with death. This is the ability he was trying to teach his disciples, the ability to know, not believe, that we are eternal. Samuel's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. My son, he said. "Matthew, you said he has been trying to reach me." "Yes." Can I feel him the way that woman felt her daughter?" "You can, but not through my intervention, through your own attention. The connection between parent and child is one of the strongest bonds in existence. Matthew has been reaching out to you since his death. You have been too wrapped in grief and anger to perceive him." Samuel felt something crack inside him. 3 months of numbness, of alcohol, of refusing to feel anything because feeling was too painful. How? How do I open that channel? The same way Jesus taught, turn your attention inward, find the awareness behind your thoughts, and then, from that place of stillness, reach out to your son, not with desperate need, not with grief, with love, pure, simple love. That is the frequency he can hear. Samuel closed his eyes. He tried to quiet the chatter of his mind, tried to find the stillness that Jesus had described. At first, nothing, just his own thoughts, racing and tangled. But he kept trying. He remembered what Jesus had said, not the thoughts themselves, the awareness behind the thoughts. And slowly, gradually, he found it, a still point in the center of himself, a place that had always been there, but that he had never noticed because he was too busy thinking. From that stillness, he reached out. He thought of Matthew, not the cancer, not the hospital, not the fear in those final moments. Just Matthew, the boy who had learned to use a hammer at 7, the teenager who played guitar on the porch, the young man who wanted to help kids who were struggling. He held that image in his mind, and he sent love toward it, all the love he had locked away since the funeral, all the love he had been afraid to feel because feeling it without Matthew here seemed too painful. And then something happened. It wasn't a voice, it wasn't a vision, it was more like a presence, a warmth that had no source, a feeling of being held by something invisible. "Dad." Samuel gasped. His eyes flew open. That was Matthew. "Yes, he heard you." Samuel was crying now, really crying, the kind of sobbing he hadn't done since he was a child. 3 months of grief came pouring out of him in waves. "He's okay," Samuel managed to say between sobs. "He's actually okay. I felt him. He's not afraid anymore. He is exactly what Jesus described. Consciousness that has released from physical form, free, whole, connected to you in ways that physical presence never allowed." Samuel cried for a long time. The being waited patiently, silent, letting the healing happen. Finally, Samuel wiped his face and looked at the creature that had crashed in his woods and given him his son back. His last words, Samuel said. Matthew said he was scared. He said he didn't feel God anywhere. The being was quiet for a moment. The dying process can be confusing. The body releases chemicals that distort perception, and Matthew had been taught to expect a certain kind of experience, a bearded man in white robes welcoming him to heaven. When that expectation was not met, he felt fear. But he wasn't alone? No, he was never alone. The moment his body released him, he was surrounded by love and light, beyond anything physical reality can contain. His fear lasted only seconds from his perspective, and then he understood. He understood everything, including why he had to leave when he did. Samuel shook his head. "I still don't understand that. Why did he have to die at 17? He had so much life ahead of him, so much he wanted to do." The being's large, dark eyes held something like compassion. Matthew's soul chose a short life for reasons that make sense from a perspective beyond physical existence. He came to touch certain lives, to learn certain lessons, and to create an opening in you that would lead to this moment. An opening in me? Your faith was comfortable, Samuel, unexamined. You believed because you had always believed, because your family believed, because believing was easier than questioning. Matthew's death shattered that comfortable faith. It forced you to confront the deepest questions. It brought you to a point where you were ready to receive truth that would have bounced off you before. "So my son died to wake me up?" Samuel's voice was bitter, despite the peace he had just experienced. "That's supposed to make me feel better." "Your son died because his soul's journey required that death. The impact on you was one part of a larger design that included Matthew's own growth, the growth of others he touched, and ripple effects you cannot currently perceive. It was not sacrifice for your benefit. It was a soul completing one phase of an eternal journey. Samuel sat with that. It didn't completely satisfy him. Maybe nothing would. But it was more than he had before, more than the empty platitudes of preachers who had never really grappled with death. "What am I supposed to do now?" he asked. "Now that I've seen what I've seen, felt what I've felt?" "Live," the being said simply, "not in the numb, half-dead way you have been living. Really live. Honor your son by embodying the love he carried. Share what you have experienced with those who are ready to hear it, and maintain your connection with Matthew. He is not gone. He is simply in a different room, and the door between your rooms can remain open if you choose." Samuel thought about Rebecca, his wife who still called every Sunday, who still loved him despite everything he had put her through. "My wife," he said, "she never stopped believing. She tried to tell me Matthew was okay, but I couldn't hear it. I pushed her away. Then reach out to her. Tell her what you have experienced. Not everyone is ready to hear about aliens and preserved memories, but she might be ready to hear that you have felt Matthew again, that you know he is okay, that you are finally ready to start healing." The being stood, slowly, testing its strength. "I must return to my vessel. The repairs I can manage with available materials. I will leave tonight." Samuel stood too. "Will I see you again? Perhaps. Consciousness that has connected tends to reconnect, but more importantly, you will see Matthew again, every time you quiet your mind and reach out with love, and eventually, when your own body completes its journey, you will reunite with him in a way that physical existence cannot provide." Samuel walked the being back to the crash site. The morning sun was warm on his face. The Tennessee hills looked different somehow, more alive, more meaningful. At the damaged craft, the being turned to him one last time. "Remember what Jesus taught, not the version the church preserved. The real teaching. You are not your body. You are eternal consciousness temporarily focused through physical form. Death is not an ending. Love is not limited by physical presence. And the kingdom of heaven, the state of peace and connection that religions promise after death, is available to you right now." Samuel nodded. "I'll remember. One more thing." The being's voice in his head carried something that felt like affection. "Matthew asked me to tell you something specific." What?" "He said to tell you that the fishing rod is still in the garage where you left it, and when you're ready, he'll meet you at the river." Samuel felt tears again. They had been planning a fishing trip when Matthew got sick, had talked about it in the hospital, making plans they both knew would never happen. "Tell him," Samuel said, his voice breaking. "Tell him I'll be there. Maybe not today, but someday I'll be there." He knows. He has always known. The being entered its craft. Within minutes, the vessel rose silently into the morning sky and disappeared. Samuel stood alone in the Tennessee woods, transformed by an encounter that should have been impossible. He had seen Jesus. He had felt his son. He had learned truths that churches had been hiding for 2,000 years. He had a lot of work to do, a wife to call, a life to rebuild, a grief to transform into something that honored Matthew's memory rather than dishonoring it. But for the first time since he watched his son die, Samuel Cross believed that work was possible, that healing was possible, that death was not the end of love, but simply a change in its expression. He walked back to his cabin and picked up the phone. "Rebecca," he said when she answered, "I need to tell you something that happened last night, and I need you to really listen, because it's going to sound impossible, but I promise you, it's true." On the other end of the line, his wife was silent for a moment. Then she said the words Samuel had been afraid to hope for. "I'm listening," she said. "Tell me everything." And he did. The conversation lasted 4 hours. Samuel told Rebecca everything, from the crash in the woods to the being on his couch to the memory of Jesus that had changed everything. He told her about the woman whose daughter was dying, about Jesus kneeling in the dirt, about the teaching that the church had never shown them, and he told her about Matthew. When he described feeling their son, the warmth, the presence, the unmistakable sense of Matthew still existing somewhere beyond physical form, Rebecca broke down completely. She had been holding on to faith for both of them these past 3 months, trying to believe enough for 2 people. And now Samuel was telling her that her faith had been justified in ways she had never imagined. "Can you teach me?" she asked through tears. "Can you teach me to feel him too?" "I can try." That night, Rebecca drove to the cabin. It was the first time she had been back since leaving. The place held too many memories of Matthew for her. The room where he had slept, the porch where he had played guitar, the workshop where Samuel had taught him carpentry. But now those memories felt different. Not like wounds, like connections, threads that still bound Matthew to this place, to them, to the life he had lived, however briefly. Samuel taught her what the being had taught him, the stillness beneath thought, the awareness behind the mind, the reaching out with love rather than need. It took Rebecca longer than Samuel. She had spent 3 months trying so hard to believe that she had forgotten how to simply be. But on the third night, sitting beside Samuel on the couch where he had first felt Matthew, something shifted. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh my God, Samuel, I feel him." "I know," Samuel said, "I know." They sat together in that presence, husband and wife, connected to their son across a boundary that should have been impassable. The grief was still there. It would always be there. But it was transformed now. Not a wall, a bridge. Over the following weeks, they learned to maintain that connection. It wasn't always easy. Life intruded. Doubt crept in. Some days, Samuel couldn't feel anything no matter how hard he tried. But he kept practicing, and Matthew kept answering. Not every time, but enough. Enough to know that the connection was real. Rebecca moved back into the cabin. They started rebuilding their life together. The cabin that had been a tomb became a home again. 6 months later, Samuel and Rebecca sat together on the porch of the cabin, watching the sunset paint the Tennessee hills in shades of orange and gold. They had rebuilt their marriage slowly, carefully. 2 people learning to trust each other again after grief had almost torn them apart. Samuel had never told Rebecca about the alien. Some things were too strange, even for a wife who had learned to trust him again. But he had told her about the vision, about feeling Matthew, about the peace he had found after 3 months of despair. She had cried. They had cried together. And then they had started the long process of healing. Samuel still talked to Matthew. Every morning, in the stillness before dawn, he would quiet his mind and reach out. And every morning, that presence would answer. Not with words, usually, just with warmth, with love, with the unmistakable sense of a son who was exactly where he was supposed to be. Sometimes Samuel would feel Matthew more strongly, on his birthday, on the anniversary of his death, on ordinary Tuesday afternoons when grief would rise up unexpectedly, and Samuel would reach out and find his son waiting. Rebecca felt it too, eventually. Samuel taught her the practice, the turning inward, the reaching out with love rather than need. And one morning she had gasped and started crying, and Samuel knew she had finally felt what he had been feeling for months. "He's okay," she said through tears. "He's really okay." "He always was," Samuel said. "We just couldn't see it." They never went back to the Baptist church. The version of faith they had been taught couldn't hold what they now knew. But they found other ways to connect with the sacred. Meditation, nature, the practice of presence that Samuel had learned from an alien who had learned it from watching Jesus 2,000 years ago. Samuel shared his experience carefully with people who were ready. A neighbor whose wife was dying, a friend whose brother had committed suicide, people trapped in the same grief and doubt that had almost destroyed him. He never mentioned aliens. He just talked about consciousness, about connection, about the doorway that death represented rather than the wall. Some people thought he was crazy. That was fine. He didn't need everyone to believe him. He just needed to share what he knew with those who could receive it. One day, about a year after the encounter, Samuel got a call from a pastor in Knoxville. The man had heard about Samuel through a mutual friend. His teenage daughter had died in a car accident, and his faith was shattered. He didn't know what to believe anymore. Samuel drove to Knoxville and sat with the man for hours. He didn't tell him about aliens. He just told him about Matthew, about the grief that had almost destroyed him, about the experience that had changed everything. And then he taught the pastor what he had learned, the stillness, the reaching out, the love that bridged dimensions. It took weeks. The pastor was resistant at first, too locked in his theological training to accept something so simple. But eventually, during a quiet morning in the church where he had preached for 20 years, he felt his daughter. The pastor called Samuel that afternoon, weeping so hard he could barely speak. "She's okay," he kept saying. "She's okay. I felt her. She's okay." "That's right," Samuel said. "That's right. They're all okay. Death is not what we were taught, and neither is God." The pastor never returned to his old way of preaching. He couldn't. He knew too much now. But he found a new way, one that focused less on doctrine and more on direct experience, one that taught people to feel rather than believe. His congregation shrank at first. The people who wanted comfortable certainties left for churches that provided them, but those who stayed experienced something they had never found in religion before: genuine connection, real peace, the kind of faith that didn't require them to pretend they had no doubts. Samuel and Rebecca visited that church sometimes. They sat in the back and listened to a pastor who had lost his daughter, teaching people that death was a doorway. It felt like the beginning of something small but important. Rebecca joined him in this work. They became known in their community as people you could talk to about death, about loss, about the questions that churches answered with platitudes but never really addressed. It wasn't a ministry. It wasn't a movement. It was just two people who had been broken by grief and healed by truth, offering that healing to others. And somewhere, on a level of reality that Samuel could feel but not see, Matthew watched his parents with pride. They had learned what he died to teach them. They had become what he always knew they could be. The fishing trip would have to wait, but that was okay. Time worked differently on the other side of the door. Matthew could be patient, and when his father finally arrived, they would have forever. If this story moves something in you, it's because the truth it contains resonates with something you already know. Deep down, beneath the doctrines and the doubts, you sense that consciousness is more than brain chemistry, that love is more than chemical attraction, that the people you have lost are not truly gone. Jesus did not come to start a religion. He came to end the fear of death, to show you that you are eternal, to teach you how to know, not just believe, that consciousness survives the body and that love survives everything. The churches have been teaching a domesticated version of this message for 2,000 years, a version that keeps you dependent on priests and sacraments and institutional authority. But the real teaching is simpler and more radical. You are already what you seek. The kingdom of heaven is within you, and death is a doorway, not a wall. If you have lost someone you love, know that they are not gone. The connection between souls does not end with physical death. It cannot end. Love is the fabric of reality itself, and the people you have loved are woven into you forever. Close your eyes, find the stillness beneath your thoughts, and reach out with love, not need. They will answer. They always do. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Who have you lost? What have you experienced that suggested they might still be present? Have you ever felt a departed loved one in a moment of stillness? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you want more revelations like this one, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Death is not what you think it is, and neither is the man who conquered it 2,000 years ago. The churches have been showing you a Jesus who fits their agenda for 2,000 years, a Jesus who needs priests to interpret him, a Jesus who requires institutions to access him, a Jesus who keeps you dependent and afraid. But the real Jesus taught something different. He taught that you are already connected to the divine, that consciousness is eternal, that love survives everything, that the kingdom of heaven is not a place you go when you die, but a state of awareness available to you right now. Samuel Cross saw Jesus in a memory that no church has ever shown, and what he learned changed everything. Now you know what he knew. What will you do with it?